It was quiet in the woods, thick trees, a long dirt path, and at the very end a small house made of wood and stone. From the outside it looked peaceful, almost calm, but inside people were dying, slowly, silently, and by choice. They had come for healing, instead they found hunger. This was Wilderness Heights, but people in town had a different name for it, Starvation Heights. Linda Hazzard called herself a doctor. She wore long, dark dresses. She spoke with confidence. She said she could cure anything from headaches to cancer without medicine or surgery. Her secret, fasting. She believed that all sickness came from toxins in the body, and the only way to remove them was to starve them out. Fasting was not new. Even in the early 1900s, some doctors believed it could help digestion or clear the mind. But Linda took it further, much further. She told patients to eat nothing for weeks, only a little water. Sometimes weak broth made from boiled asparagus or tomatoes. No bread, no fruit, no protein, only hunger. And not just hunger, she added long massages that left bruises, hot baths that burned the skin, and silence. No contact with family, no letters out. Many of her patients were wealthy. Some came from far away, England, New York, Chicago. They came because Linda said what they wanted to hear. You are not sick, you are toxic. But I can cure you. And they believed her. Here's the strange part. Linda never went to real medical school. She wasn't a surgeon. She wasn't even a nurse. But in the state of Washington at the time, there was a legal loophole. The law allowed people to practice medicine if they used alternative treatments like herbal remedies or fasting. So Linda took a mail-order course in natural healing. It wasn't real, it wasn't approved. But it gave her a title. She called herself Dr. Linda Burfield Hazzard. No hospital checked her, no one questioned her methods, and that allowed her to build her empire of death. Wilderness Heights was built in Olalla, Washington, a quiet town in the forest. It was far from any hospital, far from neighbors, far from help. The building had a few patient rooms, a kitchen, and a private office. Most patients lived there full-time during treatment, but some were too weak to walk down the stairs. Many never left. Linda said that was part of the process. That weakness meant the body was detoxifying. She told families not to worry. They are resting, she said. The body is healing itself. But inside those small rooms, patients were slowly wasting away. The first reported death was a woman named Daisy Maud Haglund. She fasted under Linda's care for over 50 days. When she died, Linda wrote that it was too late, the illness had gone too far. But those who saw the body said she was skeletal, like a person who had been starved in a prison camp. Daisy was 38 years old. She left behind a husband and a young son. That boy would grow up to be Ivar Haglund, founder of Ivar's seafood restaurants in Seattle. He never spoke about his mother's death, not once. Over the next few years, more deaths followed. One man arrived walking. After 4 weeks, he was carried out in a coffin. Another woman left her estate to Linda in her will, signed just 2 days before she died. Every time someone died, Linda had the same explanation. They came too late. The body was too toxic. It was not the fasting, it was the disease. And somehow people believed her. It's easy to ask, how could anyone believe this? Why would someone agree to be starved? But back then, people were afraid of doctors. Hospitals were cold, crowded, and full of death. Surgery was dangerous. Painkillers were risky. And Linda offered something different. She promised hope without knives, without drugs. Her voice was strong. Her eyes were clear. She looked like someone who had answers. And she used science-sounding words: toxins, purification, cleansing. She published a book. She gave lectures. In a world where people were desperate, Linda sold confidence, and people bought it. What patients didn't know was what happened after they got weak. When they could no longer think clearly, Linda would bring them papers. Legal papers, she'd say. This is just a letter to your family. Or just a small detail for your will. Some signed over property, some gave access to their bank accounts, some named Linda's husband as their legal guardian. And once they died, Linda had the rights to their homes, their jewelry, their money. The local authorities stayed quiet. They didn't want to interfere with a licensed healer. And Linda was clever. She had answers ready for every death. She kept detailed logs of each patient's progress, pulse, weight, sleep, toxic discharge. They looked official even though they were just her words, and the bodies she often arranged for quick cremation. No autopsy, no questions. Even when a neighbor expressed concern, Linda would say, "Healing can look scary, but that's just part of the process." Not everyone died. A few patients managed to escape. One woman was carried out by a friend in the middle of the night, weighing only 50 pounds. Another man crawled through the woods to reach a road. He couldn't speak, but he had a note in his shirt: "Linda Hazzard is killing people." Still, Claire and Dorothea Williamson, two wealthy sisters from London, educated, gentle, and curious about natural medicine. They didn't trust hospitals. They hated pills and doctors in white coats, but they trusted Linda Hazzard. They had read her book, Fasting for the Cure of Disease. They believed in cleansing the body. And they believed her when she said, "Illness is a lie told by a toxic body. I can bring you back to truth." Claire and Dorothea were not like other women of their time. They were independent, well-traveled, and deeply interested in wellness. Claire, the older sister, was soft-spoken, spiritual, and a believer in nature's power. Dorothea, younger and stronger, often made the decisions. In 1911, they were staying in Canada when they heard of Linda Hazzard's clinic. They contacted her. Linda wrote back quickly, "You are exactly the kind of patient I specialize in. Come to Olalla, let me restore your health." The sisters packed their bags. They had no idea it was a one-way trip. When they first arrived at Wilderness Heights, things seemed peaceful. The trees were tall, the air was cool. Linda greeted them warmly. She gave them tea and talked about internal poisons and purification through discipline. The treatment started the next morning. No solid food. Only water and a light tomato broth. No salt, no sugar, just hot liquid. They were told to rest, write in journals, and listen to the silence of healing. After a few days, the sisters felt weak, but Linda said it was normal. The body must burn through the lies, she told them. Fat, disease, weakness, all lies. We're cleaning the truth beneath. Within 2 weeks, Claire could barely stand. Her legs were thin, her cheeks sunken. Dorothea, though slightly stronger, was also fading. They were moved from the guest inn into a cottage deeper in the woods, alone. There were no phones, no neighbors, no way to leave. Each day, Linda or her husband Sam visited to give them the massage treatment, which was, in fact, rough kneading that left them bruised. Their meals, less and less, sometimes just 2 spoonfuls of broth. Their journals became shorter. The handwriting shakier. They weren't just losing weight, they were losing themselves. Before the fast, Claire had written letters to a family friend in New Zealand, but weeks passed and no reply came. They didn't know that Linda had intercepted all outgoing mail. She told the sisters their family hadn't responded. "It's best not to worry about them," she said. "Let your body do the work, focus inward." Dorothea began to feel something was wrong. She wanted to write again, to call someone, but she couldn't walk more than a few steps. Claire had stopped speaking entirely. She just stared at the ceiling, blinking slowly. Sometimes whispering about the sun or her mother. She weighed less than 60 pounds. A nurse visiting the area was called in briefly to help Linda with monitoring. She was shocked by what she saw: 2 frail women lying on dirty beds. Their ribs visible, their skin yellow, and Linda, calm as ever, scribbling in her notebook. "They are purging," Linda said, "the final phase." The nurse left the same day. She told her colleagues back in town, but few believed her. Linda had treated dozens. People died, yes, but it was always natural. and besides, Linda was licensed. Claire began vomiting dark liquid. Her breath was shallow. She could no longer sit up. One day, Linda arrived with legal documents. Claire, too weak to read, signed them anyway. A new will, a power of attorney, a paper giving Linda's husband the right to manage her estate. 2 days later, Claire died. Linda told Dorothea her toxins were too strong. She's free now. You must continue alone. Dorothea, in shock, wept, but she couldn't even lift her head. Claire's body was cremated the next morning. No autopsy, no ceremony. Just ashes in a box. Back in New Zealand, Margaret Conway, the family friend, felt something was wrong. She hadn't heard from the sisters in weeks. They had promised to write. Worried, she contacted their uncle, John Herbert, who was working in British consulate in Seattle. Herbert took the next train to Washington. When he arrived at Wilderness Heights, Linda was waiting, smiling, calm. Dorothea is recovering. Claire has passed on, sadly, but her spirit is at peace. Herbert demanded to see Dorothea. Linda refused. She is too weak. It will disturb her healing. That's when Herbert noticed something strange. Linda was wearing Claire's jewelry. It took days of pressure and threats. Finally, Herbert was allowed to see Dorothea under strict supervision. She didn't look like herself. Her hair had thinned. Her eyes were hollow. She whispered only one thing: "Help me." Herbert moved fast. He sent messages, gathered evidence, hired help. Dorothea was carried out nearly dead and taken to Seattle under constant care. She weighed just 50 pounds. Doctors said if he had come even a whisper from a woman who could barely lift her head, "Help me." Dorothea Williamson had survived, but her sister, Claire, had not. Now the world wanted answers, and the name Linda Hazzard, once spoken with respect, began to fill the newspapers with something new. Fear. After Dorothea was rescued, her uncle, John Herbert, wasted no time. He wrote letters, filed reports, spoke to the British consul. The case caught fire. The authorities in Washington launched an official investigation. Police were sent to Olalla, to Wilderness Heights, to the house in the woods where so many had entered and few had left. When the officers arrived, Linda met them with a smile. "I've done nothing wrong," she said. "These women came to me sick. I tried to save them." But her calm didn't last, because the truth was waiting just beneath the surface. Police searched the clinic. In Linda's office, they found a cabinet of documents, patient records, journals, legal agreements. Many were signed by people who were no longer alive. There were wills written in shaky, barely readable handwriting. Wills that strangely gave money, jewelry, or even property to Linda or her husband Sam. One patient left her entire estate to Sam Hazzard. Another had given Linda power of attorney, signed just 2 days before death. Over and over again, the same pattern appeared. Patient enters clinic, begins extreme fasting. Grows too weak to think or speak, signs legal papers, dies, body cremated quickly, no questions asked. Detectives went back through death records. They found that over 15 people had died while under Linda's care. But there was one problem: most had been cremated, no autopsy, no body to examine. The process was always the same: death certificate signed by Linda herself. Cause of death listed as natural illness or pre-existing condition. Body sent directly to cremation within 24 hours. One local crematorium owner later admitted it was always urgent, always hush-hush, always cash up front. No families had ever seen the bodies. In many cases, the families didn't even know their loved one had died until weeks or months later. Police tracked down family members of former patients. Some were shocked. They had received urns of ashes. They had held memorials. But now they learned the ashes might not even be real. One woman recalled receiving a small jar with no label. Another family said the urn they got was cold metal, sealed shut, with no documentation. For some, there were no ashes at all, just silence. During the search of Wilderness Heights, officers noticed something strange behind the kitchen wall, a locked door, half covered by shelves. They broke it open. Inside was a storage room, cold, dark, and lined with wooden planks. There they found personal items, a gold pocket watch engraved to James with love, several rings and necklaces, a pair of shoes that looked new but dusty, a small handbag with initials C.W. Claire Williamson's. Police now had two things: a growing list of suspicious deaths, a clear pattern of financial gain. They followed the money. They found that Linda and her husband had recently purchased land, built a larger version of the clinic, and opened a bank account in Claire Williamson's name, now managed by Sam Hazzard. They discovered withdrawals and transfers, all made after Claire's death. This wasn't just about medicine, it was about money. The prosecution team looked deeper into Linda's background. They learned that she had no formal medical degree, no hospital internship, no real certification. She had taken a correspondence course, a mail-order degree in alternative health. It allowed her, through a legal loophole, to be licensed as a fasting specialist. But not as a doctor, not as someone allowed to issue death certificates, not as someone allowed to own a clinic and handle the dying. She had fooled the system, and now the system wanted justice. By late 1912, the evidence was strong but not perfect. With most bodies cremated, there was little physical proof. What they needed was witnesses, people who had been there, people who had seen what Linda did or didn't do. Slowly, former staff came forward, a former nurse, a part-time cook, a man who had cleaned the cabins. They all had stories. They would be called to the stand. Linda denied everything. "I never forced anyone to fast," she said. "They wanted healing, I gave them hope." She blamed the deaths on bad timing, on pre-existing conditions, on spirits too weak to fight. She never admitted fault, never expressed sorrow, and never stopped calling herself doctor. Even as the case moved toward trial, she gave lectures on fasting. The courtroom was small, old wooden benches, a single hanging light, cold air drifting through cracks in the windows, but the silence inside was heavy. Everyone had come to see the woman they now called the Starvation Doctor. Linda Hazzard sat in the front, straight-backed, hands folded in her lap, no tears, no shame, still calling herself doctor, and just behind her rows of faces, some angry, some broken, some just curious, but all waiting for the truth. The state of Washington charged Linda Hazzard with manslaughter for the death of Claire Williamson. Not murder, not mass killing, but it was the strongest charge they could prove for now, because most of her victims had turned to ash. Claire was one of the few whose death had witnesses, records, and a surviving relative. Her sister, Dorothea, sat in the courtroom, pale and thin but strong in spirit. She had come to finish what her sister could not. The first to speak were former staff from Wilderness Heights. A young nurse took the stand. "I was called in to help monitor two British women," she said. "When I arrived, they were bones. I'd never seen living people look like that." She paused, trembling. One of them whispered to me, "Don't leave us." Next came the cabin cleaner, a local man named Ray. He spoke of empty broth bowls, dirty linens, and locked doors. "Sometimes I was told not to clean a room for days. When I came back, someone was gone. Gone but not taken by family. Gone to cremation arranged by Linda. No funeral, no notice, just silence." A former cook told the court she'd once asked Linda, "Should I add more salt to the broth?" Linda replied, "No, salt holds poison. Their bodies must burn it out." The cook left the job the next day. When Dorothea walked to the stand, the courtroom fell completely quiet. She looked small, almost transparent, but her voice was steady. "My sister and I believed in healing," she said. "We trusted Linda Hazzard. We were fools." She described the starvation, the bruising massages, the days without sunlight. the lies about their letters, the final moments of Claire's life, alone, voiceless, and signing away everything she owned. Tears fell in the courtroom. Even the judge's face grew pale. Dorothea finished with just 5 words. She starved my sister to death. Linda spoke in her own defense. She was calm, almost smug. They came to me ill, she said. Fasting is not death. Fasting is cleansing. She blamed Claire's death on British weakness. She said Dorothea had imagined most of it. She accused John Herbert of stealing Dorothea away during crucial healing stages. People fear what they do not understand, she added, but the jury did not look afraid. They looked horrified. It took only a few hours. When the jury returned, the room stood still. The foreman read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of manslaughter. Dorothea closed her eyes, not in celebration, but in relief. Linda Hazzard was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She did not cry. She did not argue. She stood up, adjusted her dress, and said, "History will prove me right." She was sent to Walla Walla State Penitentiary. There, for the first time in years, she ate regular meals. Incredibly, after serving just 2 years, Linda was granted early release. No one could explain it. Some said it was because of good behavior. Others whispered of connections and influence. But by 1915, she was free, and worse, she opened a new clinic. Not in Olalla, that land was tainted. But nearby, under a new name, she continued to offer fasting therapy. She still called herself doctor, and people still came. In 1938, Linda Hazzard felt ill, tired, stomach pain, dizziness. She didn't go to a doctor. She decided to treat herself with her own method. She went on a strict fast, water only, no salt, no food, no medicine. After 2 weeks, she could no longer stand. After 3 weeks, she couldn't speak. And then she died. Cause of death, malnutrition. She became her own final patient, her own final proof. Today, Wilderness Heights is gone. The building was torn down years ago. Only the forest remains, silent, thick, and cold. But some locals say you can still find old foundation stones buried under moss, and if you walk through the woods at dusk. Some say they hear voices. When a person starves someone to death, we call it murder. When that person believes they are healing the victim, we enter darker territory. Was it madness, delusion, or belief so strong that it blinded her to suffering? To understand Linda Hazzard, we have to ask the most difficult question. Did she know what she was doing? At first glance, Linda looks like a fraud. She starved patients, took their money, signed their wills, took their jewelry. Classic signs of a con artist, but then comes the part that doesn't fit. She treated herself the same way. In the end, she died using her own method, a slow, painful death from fasting. Would a true scammer die by their own lie? Most don't. They run, they fake, they hide behind masks, but Linda fasted until her body shut down. She believed. Even before her clinic, Linda was known to friends and neighbors as unusual. She spoke often about toxins, impurities, and moral weakness hidden in fat. She saw physical illness as a sign of inner failure. To her, disease was not something that happened to you, it was something you created. And the cure, pain. Sacrifice, cleansing, these ideas are not random. They sound a lot like religion. In many ancient cultures, fasting was spiritual, a way to get closer to God, to remove sin, to purify the soul. Linda took this idea and twisted it. She made fasting not just spiritual, but medical. She claimed it could cure everything: cancer, paralysis, mental illness, tuberculosis. She didn't just promote it, she preached it. Food is poison, she wrote. Appetite is weakness. Real strength comes from self-control. These are not the words of a scientist. They are the words of a true believer. But belief alone doesn't explain everything. There's something else beneath it all: control. At Wilderness Heights, Linda didn't just starve bodies. She isolated people, cut off their letters, told them what was real, what was false. She even changed their legal status, taking over their finances and property. This is psychological domination. She created a world where she was the only voice of truth. This kind of control is addictive. It makes people feel powerful, righteous, untouchable. Linda may have started with belief, but she ended with obsession. Many psychologists today might describe Linda as having narcissistic traits. Grandiosity, calling herself doctor without a degree, lack of empathy, ignoring cries of pain, manipulation, rewriting wills, isolating patients, a need for admiration, publishing books, giving lectures, claiming she'd be remembered as a pioneer. But narcissism alone doesn't kill, it was something deeper. She had what some might call malignant belief. A belief that not only must be true, but must be true at any cost, even the lives of others. Every time someone died, Linda had a reason. They came too late. They were too toxic. Their spirit wasn't strong enough. She never blamed herself, and that's the key. Because if she had admitted guilt even once, her entire system would collapse. Instead, she built a wall of justifications. Each death became a lesson, each mistake a proof that her method just needed to be stricter. In her mind, failure was never her fault. It was the patience, it was the timing, it was anything but her. Some survivors described Linda's massages as violent, bruising, cruel. Others said she watched patients suffer without emotion. This raises a darker question. Did she enjoy the suffering? There is no hard evidence of sadism, but there are patterns. She rarely stopped a treatment, even when the patient begged. She isolated them, watched them weaken, then took what they had. It's possible Linda felt no guilt at all, or worse. She believed the pain was part of the cure. That suffering meant progress. That death meant purity. In 1938, Linda Hazzard felt ill. She could have gone to a hospital. She had the money, the knowledge, the option, but she chose to fast and fast and fast until her body broke. She did not leave a final note. She did not admit fault, but her death speaks volumes. She followed her method to the end. Even when it killed her, that is not the death of a liar. That is the death of a believer lost in their own illusion. Linda Hazzard was not just a fraud and not just a fanatic. She was both. She believed in what she was doing, but she also used that belief to gain power, money, and control. She hurt people, she watched them die, and still thought herself a savior. That is the most dangerous kind of killer. The one who thinks they're saving you. Her story is a warning about blind trust, about letting belief outweigh evidence, about the power of charisma without conscience. And most of all, about what happens when one person believes too deeply in themselves. In this world, there will always be people offering miracle cures, secret methods, and fast answers. But your health is not a shortcut. And your mind is not a weakness. What happened at Wilderness Heights didn't begin with violence. It began with hope, with two women looking for healing. But hope, when guided by the wrong